Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Lucas McCabe. He's got quite a reputation as a rifleman.
He handles a rifle like it was a six-gun.
You learn how to use a gun, you're taking on a big responsibility.
It's been about 30 years since Chuck Connors died, and most people still remember him as the towering rifleman and the guy who brought the Wild West to life on screen. But what's really interesting is that there's a lot more to his story than just the role that made him famous.
Actor Chuck Connors died of lung cancer today at a Los Angeles hospital.
Actor Chuck Connors died today. Connors was best known for his role in the television series The Rifleman.
When you start looking closer, you find all these different hidden layers to his life sealed in a vault. Now, that vault has been opened, and what they pulled was so shocking it made the world freeze. Early beginnings. Before we get into the vault, let's pause for a second and talk about the man. Chuck Connors wasn't just another face from old Hollywood. He was kind of a mix of contradictions. On one hand, he had the look and presence of a tough guy who could play cowboys and soldiers without breaking a sweat. But people who knew him often said he had a surprisingly gentle, warm side too. His parents, Alban Francis, Alan Connors, and Marcella Lundrigan Connors, had both come from Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. Like many families at the time, they were looking for steadier work and a better future, so they made the move to New York City. Alan ended up working on the docks as a longshoreman, which meant long hours loading and unloading cargo ships, often in rough conditions. Marcella, meanwhile, found work as a domestic servant, and later as a custodian, jobs that were demanding but helped keep the household running. Life wasn't exactly easy, especially since Kevin grew up during the Great Depression, a period when many American families were scraping by. Their neighborhood was modest, money was always tight, and everyone had to pitch in one way or another. Still, his parents managed to give Kevin and his sister Gloria a strong foundation. They emphasized the importance of working hard, staying grounded in their faith, and making education a priority. Kevin picked up the nickname Chuck while playing baseball as a kid. Whenever he wanted the ball thrown his way at first base, he'd shout, "Chuck it to me!" and the name stuck. Sports quickly became an outlet for him, not only as a way to have fun with friends, but also as a path that would eventually open up new opportunities beyond his working-class upbringing. Chuck's schooling took a big turn when he earned a scholarship to Adelphi Academy in Brooklyn. It was a private prep school, and without his athletic ability, he probably wouldn't have had the chance to attend. That's really where his talents started to stand out. By the time he reached adulthood, he was already a towering figure, about 6 feet 6 inches and around 190 pounds, and he seemed to excel in just about every sport he tried. Baseball and basketball came naturally to him, but he also held his own in track and even football. Those skills didn't go unnoticed. His performance at Adelphi led to another scholarship, this time to Seton Hall University in New Jersey. He chose to study business, which felt like a practical path for the future, but most people at the time knew him less for academics and more for what he could do on the court and the field. Seton Hall was already gaining recognition as a strong basketball school, and Chuck's presence only added to that reputation. Looking back, it's pretty remarkable to see how a kid who grew up in the middle of the Depression, with parents who had immigrated to New York in search of work, managed to carve out opportunities through sports. The military vault. When World War II broke out, he was just 21, full of energy, and like so many guys his age, he felt that call to do his part. So, on October 10, 1942, he enlisted in the U.S. Army at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Now you might think he'd end up storming beaches or fighting in Europe, but the Army had other plans for him. They tapped him to be a tank warfare instructor, which, honestly, was such a critical job even if it didn't come with the Hollywood-style heroics. His role was to train soldiers on how to handle armored vehicles, like the M4 Sherman tank, which was the workhorse of the U.S. military during the war, seeing action everywhere from Normandy to the Pacific Islands. Chuck started out at Fort Campbell, which sits right on the Kentucky-Tennessee line, a huge base where thousands of troops were getting ready for the fight. Later, he was transferred to West Point Military Academy in New York, which is kind of a big deal because that's where they train the future leaders of the Army. At West Point, he wasn't just teaching regular recruits, he was helping prepare cadets who were on track to become officers. It's pretty cool to think about how his work shaped the skills of so many soldiers who went on to fight overseas. Even though Chuck didn't see combat himself, being an instructor was no small thing. The M4 Sherman, for example, was a beast of a machine, 30 tons, with a 75mm gun. But it wasn't exactly user-friendly, so guys like Chuck had to make sure soldiers knew how to operate it under pressure. His teaching helped ensure that tank crews could handle everything from navigating rough terrain to coordinating with infantry during battle. He served for nearly 4 years, climbing to the rank of sergeant before getting his honorable discharge in February 1946. That's a solid chunk of his early 20s dedicated to the war effort, and you can imagine it shaped him in a lot of ways, probably gave him some of that grit you see in his later acting roles. Plus, the Army wasn't all work and no play for Chuck. During downtime, he kept his love for sports alive, playing baseball on military teams. He was a natural athlete, standing at 6 feet 5 inches with a knack for the game, so it makes sense that he'd find a way to stay in the swing of things, pun intended. That time on the diamond probably kept his skills sharp, which came in handy when he went back to civilian life and picked up his athletic career again, playing pro baseball and even some basketball before he made the leap to acting. The athletic vault. After returning from the war, Chuck Connors threw himself into professional sports, and he achieved something incredibly rare. He became one of only 13 athletes in history to play in both Major League Baseball and the National Basketball Association. His basketball career began in 1946 with the Rochester Royals in the National Basketball League, where he played 53 games and averaged 4.5 points per game. That same year, he landed with the Boston Celtics for the NBA's very first season. Over 49 games, he scored 237 points, averaging about 4.8 points per game, with a field goal percentage of .247. Here's a fun fact that still surprises people. During warm-ups in 1946, Chuck became the first NBA player credited with shattering a backboard, a pretty clear sign of his sheer strength. On the baseball side, his professional career actually started before the war, when he signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers farm system in 1940. The war interrupted those plans, but after returning from service, he played for minor league teams like the Newport News Dodgers and the Montreal Royals. In 1948, he had an impressive season, hitting .307 with 17 home runs. His major league debut came in 1949 with the Dodgers, though he only appeared in 1 game. He later joined the Chicago Cubs in 1951, playing 66 games and batting .238 with 2 home runs and 18 RBIs. Across 627 minor league games, he maintained a .280 batting average with 72 home runs. While in Montreal, he even crossed paths with Jackie Robinson, contributing in a small but notable way to baseball's integration era. Injuries and a growing interest in acting eventually led him to retire from sports in 1952. But his achievement of reaching the top levels in both basketball and baseball remains legendary. The Hollywood Stardom Vault unsealed. Chuck Connors had quite the journey after he hung up his sports gear and decided to give acting a shot. It's kind of cool how he made that switch, and I think his height, he was a legit 6 feet 5 inches, and that natural charm he had really helped him slide right into Hollywood. He wasn't just some athlete trying to make it big. The guy had a presence that made people pay attention. His first real break on the big screen came in 1952 with Pat and Mike, where he played a police captain alongside two absolute legends, Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. From there, he didn't slow down, racking up roles in over 130 films and TV shows over the years, dipping his toes into all kinds of genres, westerns, thrillers, sci-fi, you name it. In those early days, he popped up in some fun roles, like playing Private Davy White in South Sea Woman in 1953, where he got to share the screen with Burt Lancaster. Then there was Old Yeller in 1957, where he played Bern Sanderson, this tough but kind-hearted guy who left a big impression in that classic tearjerker of a movie. He also got some serious attention for his role as Buck Hennessy in The Big Country in 1958, where he played this rough-around-the-edges villain opposite Gregory Peck. It showed he could do more than just play the good guy, and people definitely took notice. Chuck really hit his stride on TV, too. From 1958 to 1963, he starred as Lucas McCain in The Rifleman, which was a massive deal back then. He played this widowed rancher raising his young son Mark out in the Wild West, dealing with everything from outlaws to moral dilemmas. Over 168 episodes, the show mixed action with these heartfelt father-son moments, and Chuck's character became super iconic, especially with that customized Winchester rifle he'd twirl like nobody's business. Fun fact, Chuck actually helped come up with some of the show's ideas, and his real-life love for shooting made those rifle scenes look effortless. The show wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural touchstone, and you can still find fans raving about it today. After The Rifleman wrapped up, Chuck didn't just coast on that success. He kept busy with all sorts of projects. He starred in Branded from 1965 to 1966 as Jason McCord, a disgraced cavalry officer trying to clear his name. He got to work with Doris Day in the romantic comedy Move Over, Darling in 1963, which was a nice change of pace. Then he jumped into sci-fi with Soylent Green in 1973, acting alongside Charlton Heston in that dystopian classic, yep, the one with that famous twist. He even tried his hand at horror in 1979's Tourist Trap, playing a creepy character named Mr. Slauson, which showed he wasn't afraid to take risks. Oh, and he hosted Thrill Seekers in the early 70s, a show all about daredevils and stunts, which honestly feels like such a perfect fit for his larger-than-life vibe. Even into the 80s and 90s, Chuck was still out there hustling. He showed up in stuff like High Desert Kill in 1989, Salmonberries in 1991 with K.D. Lang, and 3 Days to a Kill in 1992. The guy just kept going, taking on all kinds of roles right up until his passing in 1992. It's pretty impressive to think about how he went from being a pro athlete. Did you know he played both basketball and baseball professionally, including a stint with the Boston Celtics and the Brooklyn Dodgers farm team? To becoming this versatile actor who could do just about anything. His career spanned decades, and he left a mark that's still worth talking about. The Private Vault Exposed. Chuck Connors wasn't just a larger-than-life figure on screen. His personal life was just as colorful and packed with stories as his career. He had this knack for living fully, whether it was through his family, his passions, or even some wild, unexpected moments that sound like they belong in a movie. Let's start with his family life. Chuck was married 3 times, and each marriage seemed to reflect a different chapter of his journey. His first wife was Elizabeth Jane Riddell, and they met at a baseball game in 1948, which feels so perfectly Chuck. I mean, this was a guy who lived and breathed sports before Hollywood came calling, so meeting his future wife at a ball game just fits. They had 4 sons together: Michael, Jeffrey, Stephen, and Kevin. And you can imagine Chuck being this towering, proud dad, probably teaching them how to swing a bat or shoot a basketball. That marriage lasted until 1962, when they parted ways through a divorce. Then, in 1963, Chuck married Kamala Devi, an actress he worked with on films like Geronimo, where she had a role alongside him. It's kind of sweet to think of them meeting on set, maybe bonding over the chaos of a film shoot. They were together for nearly a decade, splitting up in 1972. After that, Chuck tied the knot again in 1977 with Faith Quabius, another actress, though that marriage was shorter, ending in 1980. Through all these relationships, you get the sense that Chuck was someone who dove headfirst into life, even if things didn't always work out perfectly. Beyond his family, Chuck had this whole other side to him that was super engaged with the world around him, especially politics. He was a die-hard Republican and wasn't shy about it. He hit the campaign trail for Richard Nixon in the 60s and 70s, and later for Ronald Reagan, who, funnily enough, was another actor-turned-politician. Chuck's support wasn't just lip service. He was out there meeting people, shaking hands, and using that natural charisma of his to rally folks. You can picture him charming crowds with that same easy grin he brought to the Rifleman. But here's where things get really wild. One of the most out-there moments in Chuck's life happened in June 1973 during a historic U.S.-Soviet summit. Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev was visiting the U.S., and he flew in with President Nixon on Air Force One, landing at El Toro Marine Corps Air Station in California. Chuck was there on the tarmac, part of the group greeting Nixon, probably standing out like a sore thumb at 6 feet 5 inches with that unmistakable presence. And then, out of nowhere, Brezhnev, leader of the Soviet Union, mind you, spots Chuck, recognizes him, maybe from The Rifleman or one of his films, making it behind the Iron Curtain, and goes for it. He shakes Chuck's hand, and then, in this totally surreal moment, wraps his arms around him and jumps into Chuck's arms like a kid. Chuck, being the giant he was, just lifts him up like it's nothing. The crowd around them is laughing, clapping, eating it up. It's like something you'd see in a buddy comedy, not real life. Apparently, Brezhnev was a fan, and who could blame him? Chuck had that kind of universal appeal. That moment, with a Hollywood star and a world leader in this spontaneous bear hug, just sums up how Chuck's life was full of these larger-than-life, almost cinematic surprises. Later, at a party hosted by Nixon at the Western White House in San Clemente, Connors presented Brezhnev with a pair of Colt single-action Army revolvers, which Brezhnev apparently appreciated greatly. This unlikely friendship had an unusual backdrop. Very few American TV shows were allowed to air in the Soviet Union at the time. But The Rifleman was an exception, because it happened to be Brezhnev's favorite. Connors and Brezhnev got along so well that Chuck accepted an invitation to visit Moscow in December 1973. After Brezhnev passed away in 1982, Connors expressed interest in attending the General Secretary's funeral, but the U.S. government did not permit him to join the official delegation. Later in life, Chuck sold his ranch in Kern County during the 1980s and faced health challenges related to smoking, something he struggled with like many men of his generation. Even in his later years, though, he remained a fascinating figure, with a life full of surprising turns, both on-screen and off. The Vault's Last Secrets. Chuck Connors passed away on November 10, 1992, at the age of 71, after a battle with lung cancer and a recent hospitalization for pneumonia at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was laid to rest at San Fernando Mission Cemetery, and in a fitting tribute to the many chapters of his life, his headstone features the logos of the Dodgers, Cubs, and Celtics. His accomplishments didn't go unnoticed while he was alive. In 1984, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and in 1991, he was inducted into the Cowboy Hall of Fame, honoring both his on-screen contributions and his role in popularizing the Western genre. Some personal details add texture to his story. Chuck started smoking back in 1940 and, like many of his generation, didn't quit until much later. His sons remember that, despite his tough, heroic image on screen, he could be just as intimidating in everyday life, especially when showing them horror films. Even decades after his passing, Chuck's legacy continues. Reruns of The Rifleman keep his television work alive. His sports records remind fans of his remarkable athleticism, and his career as an actor shows just how versatile he was. Looking back, it's impressive to see how many different lives he led: athlete, soldier, actor, and how each chapter helped shape him into the enduring cultural icon we still remember today. If this deep dive into Chuck's life surprised or amazed you, drop a comment with your favorite Chuck fact. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more stories like this. Thanks for watching, and keep staying curious.